Okay, yeah, we're up and running, Graham. So, yeah, for the benefit of anyone joining us, welcome to today's discussion webinar session, whatever we're calling it. This is the first one that we're doing in a series called the Franchise Clinic, leveraging Graham's expertise. My name's Rob Drummond. I'm, I guess, host of this session. I'm also involved in the marketing of Frenchology as well, so very much part of the team. Got Claire here as well. Claire, are you on the chat on LinkedIn?
No, I'm on Riverside. I'm not on LinkedIn.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, we'll keep an eye on the. Tell you what, I can go into the LinkedIn chats. So for anyone watching this, if you've got questions as we go, do say hello in the chats. Post any questions. This is the franchise clinic. Partly is an idea to discuss real issues that franchisors are facing, both in terms of recruiting the right franchisees or franchise partners, as we call them, and also in increasing profitability across the network. And I guess as a third thing, also improving relationships so that your business is a joy to operate, so that you both build something of value, but also something that you feel excited to get up every day, go to work. I'm going to start in 4 minutes. So, Graham, I just wanted to ask you, have you been up to anything recently in the franchise world that would be of interest to people watching?
Well, I don't know whether it would be interesting to other people. It's definitely interesting to me. Yeah, we had last week, we had the launch of the British Franchise Association Qualified Franchise Coach Programme. And yeah, that was the first rollout of the first module, which we delivered myself and Jeanette Marshall, who obviously is also part of the Franchology team, although she's not here with us today. And it was really fantastic to, although I say that, self-praise, Rob, as you know, is no praise. But the delegates, and that's probably the most important part, was that the delegates thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, they did. They really did.
And yeah, and I think, having that feedback from the very first module that we've launched is great. And I think what was genuinely really exciting for us was the amount of times that during the session we saw the delegates actually having what can only be described as aha moments. And those aha, and we're talking about delegates who are actually, long-standing, highly experienced franchise support team members already providing high quality support to their franchise partners. So when you get, real aha moments taking place, and those literally turning into actions in front of our eyes in terms of what they are planning to change as a result. Honestly, as I say, without blowing our trumpet, but it's inspirational. And it's about the delegates. That's where, we can do whatever we can do. We can create content. We can help in whichever way we do. But ultimately, it's down to the impact that has on the delegates. So,
yeah.
And the other upside for me was actually that allowed me to drive out of Scotland down to the north of England and back, which I've been out of the habit of driving for some time as well. So that was really great for me, just to have some time out of working in the business as well, and some time to just ponder and reflect a bit of working on the business.
The aha moments never happen when you're pushing the flywheel in front of you. Or at the
100%.
Yeah, cool. Well, I make it to be midday, so let's just crack on with the discussion. Yeah, if you're watching this, you're in the right conversation. If you don't just want a functioning franchise network. And this could be a future network if you're thinking about franchising your business, or it could be an existing network that's installed in one or more ways. You want a network that's thriving, profitable, and self-sustaining without you being the bottleneck. Delivers both financial success and personal freedom. Because I guess the risk is that you create a business. I don't know if you want to speak to this, Graham, of the risk of creating a franchise business that does not give you personal freedom.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, to that point, for anybody who doesn't know me, I mean, I've spent the last 2 decades immersed in the world of franchising, operating as a franchisor, operating at CEO level, having been in the trenches, having been out providing franchise support, all of those things. And it's amazing how easy it is to be so immersed in the business, down in the weeds, and actually not having the headspace or not being able to, in some instances, if I go back 20 years, not understanding the importance of actually creating time to have the headspace. So, it's easy to be nose to the grindstone as opposed to building a scalable business that actually can operate without you and give you the freedom of time, which I think is massive, but also the financial freedom to live your life according to whatever hopes and dreams you actually have. And these things they're simple words to say, but they are so powerful when you deliver them.
I think this applies to any type of business as well, doesn't it? But maybe especially to franchising, where the stakes, in many cases, are just higher.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I think certainly with franchising, there is a unique relationship. When we are talking about, I'm subscribed to the views of Greg Nathan, author of Profitable Partnerships from Australia. And, he very eloquently points out the importance of creating interdependent relationships between franchisors and the franchise partners. And it's that level of interdependence that is, I'm going to say it's unique because, whilst the things that we're talking about definitely do apply to any business, I guess the one thing that is unique is that typically franchise partners are entering into, a long-term 5, 7, 10-year franchise agreement, and will typically have put very often their whole, might be their whole life savings, might be their house, put all that on the line. So there's a lot at stake, and I think just recognizing the importance of that and that franchise relationship is key.
We have plans in 60 minutes for the session. Hopefully, Graham and I are going to talk for about 45 minutes, but we shall see. There will be, we've been asked about a replay. There will be a replay on LinkedIn. We'll also be publishing sections of this conversation. Discussion is in the LinkedIn chat, so do say hello and pose questions. We'll stop and review for questions at certain points. This is going to be a series of franchise clinic conversations. Next one is on the 6th of May. We are going to start cycling around more specific topics, pulling in specific guests. So if there's a topic, a franchising topic you'd like us to discuss, or Graham to discuss more to the point, then again, let us know and we'll factor that in. So I'm challenging you, Graham, here. So I'd like you to just quickly introduce yourself. Who are you? What is Franchology? As succinctly as you can.
I like the fact that you said succinctly as I can, given that already I can talk for Scotland.
The time is going. Yeah.
Okay, I'll do my best. For those who don't know me, my name is Graham McKinnon. I am the founder of Franchology. As I said in the intro, I've spent the last 2 decades immersed in the world of franchising. I decided to launch Franchology, and it was created really to simply just to help franchisors and franchise partners, firstly, to avoid costly mistakes, which really are, they are easy to avoid if you know what you need to know. But equally, at the other side, if you don't know what you don't know, then it is really easy to make all sorts of what might be described as rookie errors. So, what I would say is franchology, whilst prevention is much more cost effective than cure, we do also help to address, the challenges that keep franchisors and franchise partners awake at night. So, what does that mean? It means things like, not having a clearly defined strategic plan, particularly with an exit strategy. What does that exit strategy planning look like? It's the challenge that comes from awarding franchises to the wrong people, well-intentioned, but franchise partners who don't have the right capability or desire that are aligned with the franchisor's vision and values. It's about the challenges that come from ineffective marketing, client acquisition, that isn't working in the way that it should, resulting in underperformance, franchise partners not making the money that they need, and franchise always not generating them the management service fees that they need. I guess it also comes from not attracting enough high-performing franchise partners, and that point becomes amplified because anybody who's thinking of investing in a franchise will definitely want to speak to people within the franchise. So, if you've got an underperforming element, if you've got an unhappy network, if you've got franchise partners not following the model, but blaming the franchisor, and franchise support teams. I mean, I've been there myself, given franchise support, coached, mentored, and supported literally hundreds of franchise partners over the years. But it's difficult for franchise support teams. So, they may be struggling to manage underperformance, struggling to manage territory growth effectively. All of those things, are commonplace in the world of franchising. So, at Franchology, we address these challenges using the lived experience that I've gained over the 2 decades as a franchisor, but also over the last 6 years as a franchise consultant, coach, and mentor. So, the reality of that is using all the knowledge, insights, experience gained from all the mistakes I made. In some respects, Franchology is here because I wish we had someone who was there to be able to guide us when we were trial and error and making all sorts of what might be described as schoolboy errors. The last thing to say is that actually in Franchology, we recognise those things maybe differently from some other providers and service providers, which is we see these challenges as symptoms. And that lived experience allows us to really get under the skin of the business and to seek to find out what is actually going on. What are the root cause of these symptoms? So rather than just diving in to try and solve an immediate problem, one of the first things we do is actually have a holistic review of the franchise business, and to be able to identify the things that are going well, which are great, but equally to be able to identify the things that would effectively form the key pillars of success, and be able to provide franchisors with a scorecard in terms of where they are in each of the key areas of the business, but also to be able to provide them with a recommendations report so that they can either do that, solve these things if they're able to do that themselves, or they can engage Franchology if they need some help.
Yeah.
So,
I think from my perspective,
I don't know how succinct that was, Rob. But
yeah, we'll work on the 60 seconds thing. I think from my perspective, from the discussions we've had, it's the positive application of psychology to achieve the success that you want in franchising.
Yeah, definitely, that's at the heart of the franchology service, and utilising the insights that can be gleaned from the world of psychology, also underpinned with the research. There's now, it's actually decades of research, but again, these are things I didn't know about when I was running a franchise, but actually decades of research in neuroscience, research relating to medical MRI scans that actually show what's happening in our brains, particularly when we are being coached and or mentored. And that has been transformational to be able to bring in those aspects along with the franchising experience that I and the team have got. Hence the name, Franchology. It's the blend of those two things that really makes the service that we provide quite unique but transformational for our clients.
I think it's so easy to mentor people with good intentions and accidentally push people away.
Unfortunately, it is. And again, this point is relevant to any business, but it's amplified in franchising. And it's amplified because, typically at the beginning, you've got franchise partners who, have invested a lot of money, they come on board, they're expecting results and expecting results fast. And if and when those results either don't come fast enough or in some instances, don't come for a significant period of time, the impact from a psychology, and human behavior perspective, it can be really devastating. And I remember many, many times thinking, well, these franchise partners are just not listening to me. I'm telling them what to do, and they just don't get it. And here I am 20 years later thinking, how wrong was I? It was, and actually, what I've realized with the psychology and the neurosciences that's behind it, I can now go back in time and I can see when I inadvertently got it right in terms of the right level of connection with franchise partners, and created that environment for them to be coached and mentored effectively. But I also remember many occasions where I got it wrong. And oh my goodness, if only I knew then what I know now, a significant number of people's lives would have been different.
Let's talk then about the first step, which is the right strategy. And I feel like there might be a bridge from what you've just said in terms of maybe understanding people's hopes and dreams and connecting to that.
Yeah.
But where do we need to start with the first step?
So the first step for me is exactly that. And the term hopes and dreams, it goes right to the heart of the research. So the research that has been done now confirms that actually connecting with people's hopes and dreams and helping them to create their ideal self is actually a key foundation before any coaching is actually done. And that includes for me, the reality of I put purpose right at the forefront of all of this. I think, being really clear about what is it that's going to drive each individual franchise partner. And having a clear sense of purpose, clearly defined, clearly articulated, is something that really is impactful when it comes to dealing with the challenges that they're going to be dealing with in terms of launching and growing, a successful franchise. But the other part of that is having a really clear picture of what their hopes and dreams are. What is driving them and what will drive them, particularly when the chips are down, particularly when the challenges are coming at them right, left and centre. And particularly when you've got franchise partners who this is the first time, perhaps, that they've run a business, perhaps. So they've,
Would you have documentation that you could point back to them to and say, you asked me to be what we call your uncomfortable friend. This is where you said you wanted to go with it.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like there has to be some evidence of what you've said in terms of where you're trying to get to.
Yeah, for sure, and that includes, for me, the perfect exit strategy as well. So actually thinking right at the beginning about what a potential exit could look like, even although we all know that in 5-10 years' time, life will change and things will move on. But even starting with that, I think, is hugely important. And you mentioned the term the uncomfortable friend, which is certainly something that I discovered myself after genuinely hitting my head against the brick wall for so many times. And that question is is one that I've asked every single franchise partner that I've had the pleasure and privilege of supporting over the last 20 years is, are you comfortable for me to become your uncomfortable friend? And I ask that question at the beginning of every relationship. And without exception, nobody has ever said no to me. The beauty of it is that when you need to have an uncomfortable conversation, I refer them back to the fact that, do you remember the time? And I say it whenever I had the conversation, I said, when we need to have it, you'll remember this conversation. And they do.
So perhaps it's not even just the right strategy, it's also the conversations about the strategy, because you are going to go off the path. And you have to go off the path to know where the path is. And then when you go off the path, you need to have people who have your back and can say, look, this is what we agreed at the outset. This is where you're trying to get to.
100%. And the difficulty for a lot of people is that the vast majority of people, and I was in this camp as well, when things go wrong, most of us are hardwired to actually, if we're using coaching, again, there's a whole conversation that we could have around coaching and what is coaching and what is it not. But when you are using a coaching approach, most of us actually deviate towards coaching for performance. And that coaching for performance is, again, the research now physically shows what happens in our brains when we coach for performance in isolation. And that typically creates what the researchers have defined as a negative emotional attractor. Conversely, when we talk about hopes and dreams and we are focused on those aspects of coaching, that triggers what the researchers define as a positive emotional attractor. So the opposite. But a negative emotional attractor means that people in that position, quite often, they close down. They feel threatened. They feel criticized. There is physical activity in our brains that actually take us to a place which often it's fight or flight. And I can think of countless conversations that I've had with franchise partners who are fighting because they don't understand what is happening to them and they can't quite equate it to, so the only explanation they can give is it must be the model and it must be the franchisor, and it definitely can't be me because I've been successful in my whole career. So the strategy is crucial. There's no doubt about it. But to your point, Rob, so are these other things. And all too often as franchisors, we are not well equipped to deal with the complexity of what these interdependent relationships actually need.
What's the one thing that people, anyone watching, might want to take away regarding strategy?
I think first and foremost, this is a double-edged coin for me. So everything that I talk about, even if I talk about franchise partners or franchisors, actually it applies to both. So
It's two
first
sides
and
of the same
foremost,
coin.
yeah, the first and foremost, and as I say, when something's not going well, my first reaction is, what am I doing that is either not helping, or what am I not doing that isn't helping? So when things are not going well, I've learned over the years to look to me. But in relation to strategy, the franchisor needs to have a really clear strategic plan. The first time that we introduced that within the first franchise that I was involved with, it was transformational. For the first time, we stopped, going all over the place and actually having clarity about where we were going, clear sense of purpose, clear vision, clear mission, clear values, all of that. But at the same time, the franchise partner needs to have a clearly defined strategic plan. This is an interdependent relationship. And so the same things apply, even thinking about exit right from the beginning and recognizing that, yes, things may change, but ultimately having thought about it, the way that you build your business will be different it'll be different depending on what you actually want to achieve. Simply put, if you want a lifestyle business that actually you don't want to scale and you just want freedom of flexibility of time, that's fine, as long as that's aligned with the franchisor strategy.
Yeah.
And all too often, it's not.
If the franchisor is expecting you to maximize the opportunity on a particular territory and you're trying to run a lifestyle business, then that's not compatible.
100%. And again, when a franchisor's success, which should be linked to the success of their franchise partners, not from what they sell the franchise, again, sell the franchise. In my language, it should never be sold. It should only ever be awarded. But getting all of these expectations aligned at the beginning and having really detailed conversations and commitments, that's the key around strategy. And all too often what I see, and we were guilty of it ourselves, we learned this stuff. I learned this stuff over years. What I would like people to take away is there is a way to accelerate and cut through all of this and avoid making the mistakes in the first place. There's a way to get this right, and that's what Franchology is here for.
I feel like we've got a nice bridge there to step 2, which is something you just mentioned, franchisee attraction. Could we maybe talk about the pitfalls of this?
Yeah. So I think the first pitfall is that all too often franchisors jump in thinking that they just need to sell franchises because, and a lot of this depends on the support and advice and guidance that they've been given in setting up the franchise in the first instance. So, it's crucial to get that right at the beginning. But unfortunately, not everybody who's providing advice is giving necessarily the right advice, and not everybody actually has the lived experience that we're talking about here. So, if you're starting a franchise right at the beginning, you want to ensure that you are starting it in a way which means that you are absolutely ready and prepared to be able to build a franchise that is going to stand the test of time.
Cutting corners early on, I think, is going to sow so many seeds of trouble, isn't it? And making concessions as well.
Yeah, and those, like I said, this is not for me to criticize. This is just to share the lessons that I've learned, because either cutting corners or actually not even having the franchise acquisition fee at the right level. I see this all the time, whereby people think, well, it needs to be cheap for people to afford it so I can sell it. But if having it so cheap means that you cannot provide the right level of support that a franchise partner needs, the outcome becomes inevitable. the franchise partner is highly likely to fail, and the franchisor is highly unlikely to make any generate any profitability from that franchise partner, and that relationship is almost destined to be adversarial from the outset. So, but the solution to that is about attracting the right franchise partner. You know, we use the term magnetizing. You want it to be like a magnet whereby people are drawn to you as opposed to something I'm going to sell to them. And that again comes back to that having, so we talked about strategy and having the right strategic plan. This part is having the right franchise recruitment strategy, and the right systems and processes in place. I mean, you know, the whole franchise model ecosystem is built on systems, processes, things that can be replicated. But again, I see franchisors making huge mistakes that they don't realize that they're making. But again, what I can say from experience is that having the wrong franchise partners in the network, you will spend 80% of your time on 20% of the people who are.
Well, it's like getting married too quickly, isn't it?
Again, 100%. And you know, there's plenty of analogies around, you know, the franchising sector for years about this being like a marriage, and very often without a prenup.
With no prenup, yeah.
But that again, you know, go back to the psychology. What happens when we feel trapped in anything in life? And you know, if you're in a 5 or 10 year franchise agreement, whatever it is, things are not working out. You're hemorrhaging money. You know, your partner perhaps, who was never fully bought in, is sitting in the background saying, "Hey, I told you so." You know, it's devastating. It is devastating, and that's where the fight or flight mechanism kicks in on steroids. But all of these things, whilst nothing is you can never say anything is 100% guaranteed. But a lot of what I'm talking about absolutely can be avoided. It absolutely can. And I mean, you know, it's well known in the business world, isn't it, that actually sometimes we've got to slow down to speed up. All too often, you know, franchisors rush in to even sometimes when their gut feeling is telling them this isn't right, and yet somebody's sitting with, you know, 20, 40, £100,000. They're sitting with that saying, "Yep, I'm good to go, and I've got the money, and I want to do this." And I've been there where I've refused people. We've refused people. You know, we put systems in place to make sure that we avoid, wherever possible, making those kind of mistakes. But when you position your brand to attract high caliber franchise partners whose ambitions align with yours, you know, you create a culture of growth, commitment, you know, focus on long-term profitability. That's the stuff that will create an environment whereby franchise partners will seek you out. Particularly high-performing franchise partners, because if you don't have these things, high performers will smell that a mile off, and they won't come on board. So all of these things are self-fulfilling prophecies, but yeah. So that I guess the key here, you know, in this step of the process to build a successful, scalable franchise, you cannot skimp on getting that franchise recruitment strategy right. And as with all these things, whether it's franchise recruitment, strategic planning, coaching, mentoring, I genuinely believe that if you want to go somewhere, find someone that's gone there before. and I don't mean that's all about me. If it's not me, that's absolutely fine. There's other people who have lived experience as well. But
if you get it wrong, it's so hard to undo because you've got to wait 5 years at least for the renewal to come around. Or if you get your territories wrong, then they're kind of locked in for quite a long time. There's so many problems that I think you can create for yourself.
100%, and these can be painful problems to solve for sure. Again, having said that, I believe in the principle that if you've made a mistake as a franchisor, it is unethical to just blame the franchise partner in that process. So, in the same way that interdependence means that you share in the benefit, interdependence means that you should also share in the pain. And if you've got it wrong, and there is, if there is no way back, then in that instance, then finding a way to have an amicable exit is actually the right thing to do. And but again, that comes back to making sure that you've got the right set of values in place within the organisation to begin with, and that you avoid pocket first behaviours, which we all will have had times that we've displayed pocket first behaviours because we're human. But that isn't going to build you a long-term profitable franchise business.
I think you're better defined by what you say no to than what you say yes to.
I would agree with that. Yeah. But that's difficult. It's a difficult thing to do, and I don't take that lightly. But one of the things that we did very early on, but having gone through the pain of some of this stuff, was we put a process in place whereby decision making was actually part of the franchise team's remit. So it wasn't just the franchise recruitment manager saying, this guy, this girl, or this person is great. We actually assessed them as well. And in that process, it wasn't a case of necessarily saying no, but what we learned and what we recognized was being able to identify where individuals needed very specific support that differed. And that's, sometimes a lot of franchisors make the mistake of, here's the process, here's the onboarding, and everybody goes through a sheep dip process and comes out the end. And then we wonder why, actually, that didn't work particularly well because, do you know what? Every single person is unique, and they are coming to this with their own unique set of skills, experiences, etc. So it has to be tailored.
Let's move on and have a look at step 3. So we're really talking about sustainability from an existing set of franchise partners, and that deriving from accelerating management service fees. What are the? I guess the first question is, what's the main pitfall from this?
So I think all too often what I've seen, what I've experienced, and what I see still happening today is we make so many assumptions about exactly what needs to be done from a franchise partner's perspective. And yet we don't necessarily have the right systems in place, the right level of accountability, the right level of detail going in at the beginning to make sure that the franchise partner actually really understands what we have said. We can put 5 franchise partners in a room, say the same thing to all 5, and all 5 will hear something different. That's life. That is life. So that's not unique to franchising.
Yeah, my kids do that as well.
We're not talking about what my wife would say about that, but that is the reality. Our brains are again hardwired. So this comes back to psychology and neuroscience. Our brains are hardwired to filter out a lot of things in terms of what's going on in any given situation. And equally, we're hardwired to hear what we want to hear. So we might just focus more on what we want to hear. So, for example, a franchisor might talk about how amazing and marvelous the franchisor's marketing system is, and that may well be true. A franchise partner might take that as, well, you're going to deliver all these leads and clients to me, and I'm just going to sit here and wait. And I'm being purposefully exaggerated in that description, or anything in between. But the reality is that each franchise partner, each territory, each local community, they're all different. And whilst there may well be all these amazing things and in terms of brand and brand standards and brand guidelines and logos and all of these things and collateral, whatever may be there, that's fantastic. But if a franchise partner has never done marketing in their life, some of the most successful people I've met have had teams of marketeers around them. And suddenly we're taking them out of that environment and saying, okay, now you are the marketing director.
You're the marketeer, yeah.
You're the sales director. And by the way, you're the finance director. And before you know where you are, you've just got a situation of overwhelm, potentially. And I mean, in some instances, some franchise partners invest in a franchise thinking they're buying a job. And
that overwhelm is going to feed into creating a negative emotional attractor as well.
You're learning fast, Rob. That is exactly what happens. So, and when the negative emotional attractor kicks in, if all we are doing is saying, hey, franchise partner X, Y, or Z, this is not good enough. You're not performing. And we're going down this route of almost like, performance management to the point that they actually feel like an employee. And,
that's what they were trying to get away from.
That's what they were trying to get away from. They didn't want to be an employee, and nor should they be treated like an employee. But there's a whole host of stuff in what we are just discussing here that if as a franchisor, you want a strategy that is built on accelerating management service fee revenue, and let's be honest, which franchisor in the world does not want that? We all do. Okay, so if that's the strategy, then you need to implement growth frameworks that drive franchisee success, that result in increased network-wide sales, that boost MSF contributions, that make your franchise a powerhouse of profitability, that picks up on the latest best practice that is just emerging from the coalface, and that is seamlessly, translated into the whole network. There's a whole host of systems and processes that need to be in place to make this stuff happen. Back to your question at the beginning, what's the biggest mistake? Is that a lot of franchisors take the view, and I've seen the worst of this in a business that I had to turn around. The worst case scenario is that franchisors think, well, they're self-employed. They've bought into this. The model's here. They just need to get on with it. And
is it worth thinking about the franchise life cycle as well, and how they're maybe sort of, in air quotes, toddlers early on, and they're more dependent on you, and then they're adolescents later on, and they think they know it all, and they probably hate you. And it's being clear about setting expectations of when these things are likely to happen and what they're likely to experience.
Well, it's interesting. Again, I'll quote Greg Nathan that I mentioned earlier, from author of Profitable Partnerships, based in Australia. Greg has been ahead of the curve in this space for years, and I remember reading Profitable Partnerships back in 20 years ago. And he defined a process specifically around the franchisee factor, which I think is relevant in this conversation, whereby, the franchise, you had the franchise partners' satisfaction levels on one axis, and then you've got this movement from, dependence to independence and then to interdependence going along the bottom axis. And he defined this beautifully, because to begin with, pretty much every franchise or franchisee relationship at the beginning, the satisfaction levels off the scale. This is a new opportunity. They come in excited. It's what Greg defined
It's
as
a love fest initially.
Yeah, it's a love fest. Well, Greg defined it as the glee stage. So this is in the E-factor model. It was the glee stage. And at that point, they are very dependent. So just like a toddler, they are very dependent. But as time moves on, and particularly when the franchise partner's paying you fees, then that's where, perhaps they start to think a little bit more about, well, what am I actually getting, and what results am I
What am I
getting?
paying all these fees for when I could do it all myself and I know it all?
Yeah, you've got it. Have you been a franchise partner? No? But this again comes back to the psychology. This is how our brains work, and so typically that a franchisor needs to understand this. I used to share this with franchise partners. I would talk about the fact that this is what happens, and we're going to navigate this together. And you've got to take them through this curve to the point of reaching interdependence, and where you move through the kind of glee, fee, me, all about me. I want to be free of this. I'm doing this all on my own if they're being successful, until they actually see and come back to the we stage, which is, this is about us working together. This is about us, we are genuinely stronger together. That's where the synergy comes in. So, yeah, that's part of this whole process, and supporting franchise partners through each stage, recognizing that different franchise partners will have different challenges, and they will hit these milestones at different stages. And it goes on, because, I remember one franchise partner that said to me, the fact that I'm paying you £100,000 a year in fees, I'm absolutely delighted with. And there was another 8 or 9 that said, I don't want to be paying you anything in fees at all. And he saw the value, they just saw the fee. And it's an interesting dynamic, but needs to be, if you want to scale and you want to unlock recurring revenue growth, and you want to continue to ensure that high performers are actually still stretching and optimizing what's available from a territory, then that doesn't just happen by default. You need a strategy.
And perhaps it should be clear that the management service fee is essentially an investment, and it's well worth being involved in the network for.
But there's 100% again. That is definitely a key part. But it is interesting, isn't it, that how we all, and again, this is not unique to franchising. This is just human behaviour. What once was added value suddenly becomes taken for granted.
Yeah, just becomes part of the furniture.
And I remember the very first 2 weeks of induction with the first franchisor that I worked in, and the owner of the franchise said to me, "If you ask a franchise partner what they want, the answer will be more." and more of what will vary from franchise partner, but they're paying you fees, and they want value, and they want more.
Yeah.
So that relation needs to be symbiotic and needs to be robust and strong.
Yeah. And I guess that's why the kind of the cost of the franchise opportunity is important as well, in terms of the strategy and what that looks like at price point, because in order to resource and make sure that you have the support structure in place to try and support that franchise partner, it through the marketing, the franchise support team, it needs, if you go at a lower level, you don't necessarily have the funds as a franchisor to put the right support in place to grow.
Completely, Claire. Completely. And that, sadly, even though franchising is still one of the most successful strategies for growth that you can have, sadly, these are the things that can still lead to, disaster and failure.
Yeah.
Because it's just not been. It typically isn't. Usually, it's just from lack of knowledge. It's not. It's not that people set out to fail, but yeah, that's one of the unintended consequences of exactly those things.
Step 4 is profitability, which I feel like we've kind of talked around, but maybe it's a case of taking a more proactive role in optimizing unit economics, franchisee performance, not just assuming that it will happen. We've kind of touched on that, but I wondered if there's anything else to say.
Just on that. So again, this is an example of lived experience, and it's linked to the strategic plan. One of the most important milestones that we created as part of a strategic planning process was one of the strategic objectives that we set for ourselves when I was in the franchisor space, was that we set a strategic objective around franchisee profitability. Now, for some that might already be the case, and if you're doing that, then I take my hat off to you, because that's fantastic. But the reality is that we actually, at the time, we earned our management service fees on turnover, not on franchisee profitability. And and now, stating the obvious, we could have been earning fees because they were generating turnover, but if they are not profitable, we are storing up a risk, or creating a recipe for disaster. Because sooner or later, that's going to bite them, and it's going to bite us.
In turn, the franchisor, yeah.
So, again, it's so obvious when I say it now, and it will be obvious to anybody who is listening to this webinar. But the question is, are you doing it? And if you have a strategy in place to improve and optimize franchisee profitability, is it robust? Is it working? Are you all over that from a franchise support perspective? And again, this comes back to, franchise support teams have a lot of things to do. They really have a lot of responsibility. It's not an easy gig being part of the franchise support team. But if we recognise that the franchisor's success will equally suffer if franchise partners are not profitable and growing a profitable business. And by the way, if you want to scale a business, you need to have profit and you need to have cash. And one of the biggest mistakes that I see happening is that franchisors scale too quickly. They get a flurry of success. They think, okay, this is great. I'm on my way to having 100, 200 territories awarded or whatever. But actually, the level of profitability is not there. And the difference between having a single unit operator versus multi-site and all of the systems and all of the differences that takes, it's significant. So, you've got to have your own house in order as a franchisor before you scale. And equally, from a franchise partner's perspective, just because somebody says they want to take another territory, or 2 or 3, or whatever, just because they want to, doesn't mean to say that's what they need. And you can literally take, if the initial territory isn't robust and isn't operating at real optimization at every level, then very quickly you can start to just move 1 or 2 key people around and take the next territory, and you end up not only losing on the territory optimization that you've got for that territory growth, but it's amplified because the other territory now that you've blocked and awarded is also going to be underperforming. And those two things create negative emotional attractors, they create stress, they create anxiety, they create all sorts of behaviours that actually shouldn't have been allowed to happen in many cases in the first instance.
And if you've got these problems on a small scale, you're going to have them on a much bigger scale if you don't address them earlier on.
It's
Maybe also, we're not
frightening
talking about rocket science, we're talking about tiny noticeable things and making sure that you've dotted the I's and crossed the T's.
You are. And as we know within franchology, tiny noticeable things are like TNTs and they are like dynamite. And they can be positive, like dynamite. It can be a positive explosion, or it can be absolutely devastating.
Move on to step 5 then. So raving fans and ultimate freedom. We've got to know that franchisees become your mechanism for scale via referrals. So how do we make this happen?
So raving fans. It's such a simple 2-word statement, isn't it? But for me, that is the one, or not the one thing. It's one of the things which, when you are able to create a raving fan status and a culture of raving fans. So again, we created, going back to the first franchise, we created a culture whereby reciprocity, sharing was absolutely at the forefront of everything that we did. And we also had a strategy whereby we wanted to, it wasn't, we were striving for excellence in everything that we did. Sometimes to our own detriment, sometimes recognizing that, you know what, this is good enough for where we are right now, but we were constantly pushing. But part of that was because we wanted and we understood the value of having raving fans. So go back to what we talked about the attraction and the magnetization of franchise partners joining the brand. I've never, in all my 20 years, anybody who is joining as a new franchise partner will definitely want to speak to existing franchise partners, just the way it is. And okay, some people fudge that, and some people will, I'll let you speak to these ones, but please don't speak to these ones over here because they are the complete opposite and antipathy of Raven fans. But by having a strategy to focus on creating raving fans, and that by that I don't mean that's not about just saying yes and agreeing with everything that the franchise partner is saying or suggesting, but it is working at a level of interdependence, which includes having the uncomfortable conversations. It includes doing what is in the franchise partner's best interest and helping them to not go down the rabbit holes, of which there are a myriad that people can go down. It's about helping them to stay focused on the model. It's about making sure, Claire mentioned just a few minutes ago that you have their back, that you actually care. And, again, but we're not going to talk about coaching with compassion in any detail at all today. But coaching with compassion and genuinely caring about the people who have invested in the franchise and living by the values, doing the right thing, spending and investing time in these individuals. That this is the stuff, and it's not rocket science, but it's not easy. It requires dedication. It requires commitment. It requires, what do you do when the chips are down and they've really, perhaps they are facing some family illness. Perhaps they have just been diagnosed with a terrible disease. Perhaps they are suffering from mental health and anxiety. You know, these are the moments that define who you are and what you do.
I'm getting the sense that it comes back to the relationships and the tiny noticeable things and the fact that you're there when you're needed to be there. It's how you react when things go wrong more than when things are going right.
Yeah, it's all too easy, isn't it? When things are going right, to just think again, yeah, it's all going fantastically well. But over the years, as I said, I've had the privilege of supporting hundreds. The first network, we had 150 franchise partners. So with 150 franchise partners, you have got every aspect of life happening on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So things are going to go wrong. That is just inevitable. And it is how you deal with the things that go wrong as well as the things that go right. And it's about leadership. It's about, literally, helping the franchise partners, helping them to see that you're in the trenches with them, if that's what is required. And you are here to see them through the tough times and to be able to absolutely still achieve their hopes and dreams further down the line. But there are all sorts of moments that are tricky to navigate. And again, I say that, but this is why I say, if you want to go somewhere, find someone that's gone there before, because they can be navigated. These risks can be mitigated, and responsible, ethical franchisors are doing this. This is also happening. I mean, I know we're focusing on the things that can go wrong, but there are also, significant number of franchisors who are doing this stuff and they're doing it well. So they should be applauded as well. So we shouldn't lose sight of that. It's I don't want anybody to think that this is all about doom and gloom, because it's not.
And I guess the first step is knowing where you are at the moment. I wondered if you could talk through the holistic review process and how that works and what it looks like.
Yeah, so in terms of establishing where you are, the franchology process is exactly that. It's a holistic review that we provide, whereby we will essentially lift the bonnet and assess the franchise, every single aspect of the franchise, from strategy, from franchise recruitment strategy, operations manuals, mental health, well-being, legals, everything that is required to have a successful franchise. We carry out that holistic review, and we, as I said right at the beginning, we provide a score in each of the key areas, so that franchisors, and this could be applied to franchisees, but franchisors predominantly can see exactly where they are, and they can see exactly what the gaps are in terms of, this is where you are now, this is where you want to get to, and help them to create, through the recommendations report that is created. And that's a multidisciplinary thing. So that's not just the team within franchology, but we also work with trusted partners who provide part of the service as well. So you're getting the creme de la creme, if you like, to sound like Miss Jean Brodie. But yeah, the creme de la creme in terms of, okay, these are the things that you're doing well. And therefore, if you're getting 8, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 for these things, you don't need to be worrying about that. But here's the things that perhaps need your attention. And the recommendations report, as I say, would spell that out. So franchisors can either then implement what they are capable and able to do. But if they don't have the bandwidth, then things can either be outsourced from a coaching, mentoring, or consulting perspective. And we also have an outsourced service as well. So depending on where franchisors are in their own life cycle, yeah, we have an outsourced service that we can provide. For example, coaching. We can either train franchise support team members to become effective coaches, and/or we can provide an outsourced service, which actually gives a level of independence and perhaps also frees up franchise support team members to focus on other things, particularly around the model and whatever else. But I guess in summary, all of that, what is our mission? What is our purpose? Well, at Franchology, we don't just consult. We are on a mission to transform franchising together. And those three words are really important. Transformation is what we're about. Obviously, it's focused on franchising. I hope that's clear. But it is about working together. And in the same way that franchisors and franchise partners need an interdependent relationship, that's exactly what we have created within Franchology as well. So interdependence and empowering and helping people to achieve their hopes and dreams.
So if you've enjoyed the last hour with us, obviously we can't talk about people's specific circumstances, but if you'd like to talk to Graham, for 45 minutes about your specific business, then franchology.com/start is the place to book that call, which is free in the first instance. So that's the place to go. I've put that link in the chat. I put a quote in from Jonathan, who is contributing to the forthcoming Franchology book. He says, since engaging with Franchology shortly after signing our first franchise partner, our progress has been remarkable. In just 1 to 2 years, we've expanded to 10 franchise partners and have developed a comprehensive plan for continued growth, aiming to reach 150 franchise partners over the next decade. This success is directly attributable to the innovative strategies and unwavering support provided by Franchology. So, glowing words. Any closing remarks, Graham?
No, no other than, I love what I'm doing. I love what we are doing, and I love the difference that we are making. So, that for me is what gets me out of bed in the morning. And if there is anybody out there that has got any questions whatsoever, just to reinforce, I'm really happy to have invest 45 minutes of my time to just have a conversation and to see if there's anything that either can help in that 45-minute conversation, or if there's anything else that somebody would like to explore further. Understandably very open to doing that as well.
Just quickly before we end the call, if there is anyone watching live, if you've got any questions for Graham based on anything we've mentioned or discussed, we'll leave the call open for a minute or two. So if anyone has any questions, and if not, we'll end the session. I'd just like to say thanks for joining us, and we'll be back again doing this in a month or so on I believe the 6th of May.
Good stuff. And thank you, Claire, for your contributions, and Rob for acting as the host and facilitating, because I have to say you've made the conversation really easy from my point of view. I just hope I haven't bored people to tears.
Absolutely not.
My neighbour has started lawn mowing, which is always happens on webinars. So just as you're about to read out the testimonial or something,
the good news is we can't hear it, Rob, so no problem. No.
I shall go around and have a word with her and tell her to improve her time. Okay, we haven't got any questions. So if anyone is watching the replay has questions, either post on the video on LinkedIn or get in touch with us through franchology.com/start, and we'll leave this here. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Rob.
Take care.